Recently, a movie was released on Amazon Prime called One Night in Miami, and it's about four iconic characters: Cassius Clay, who we now know as Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown, meeting in a hotel in Miami. I wanted to have a conversation with my best friend, my mentor, Orpheus Black, and we wanted to share our discussion because we felt there were many points that were important and beneficial to the world we are now living in. I hope you'll enjoy this episode as much as we did coming together for it. This is the Pete Wong Podcast, sharing the things that I love with those that I love. I've always wanted to talk about the things that I care about in life. People have told me time after time, why don't you just share more of you? And with that, let's go.
This isn't what we're normally used to. We're usually used to doing fighting videos and talking about all the epicness of combat in movies. But, this time we have a little something different. So I don't know where it fits in the paradigm. I feel like struggle is a good segue, but I'm not too sure. But what's the name of the movie that we're doing today, Pete?
So we're going to be talking about One Night in Miami on Amazon Prime.
Man, what did you think about that?
Saw the movie. I've seen the movie twice now.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. And when we last talked on the phone, I was wanting to talk to you about it, and then you were like, "Hey, I'm gonna watch it. It's we're gonna be watching it tonight or tomorrow." And then you said you wanted to talk about it. What better way to talk about this movie than with you?
Well, I appreciate that. And I was shocked by the fact that you wanted to see this movie. People don't watch black, the traditional air quotes black movie. And and I understand there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of bad ones. And a lot of people can't see themselves reflected back in the characters. So when I hear from a amazing Asian man about watching this movie, I'm like, okay, I'm interested. So it actually accelerated the process of me watching this movie, because I usually like for a movie to die down and let all the fluff go away so I can watch it without everybody saying, oh, it's so amazing. You know what I mean? But I'm like, I want to support the conversation that's happening around this movie and shape some of the conversation about the movie and about some of the topics they're bringing up, because it's like three of my favorite iconic individuals of all time. I mean, this is the Black Rat Pack. This is Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, and Malcolm X in one room on one stage. And I understand it was a play prior to being a show, but it was like an opportunity to see like the Super Friends, you know what I mean? Like the Justice League in one room, and see a very intimate portrayal of some of my heroes.
That day, that afternoon, I saw a video clip of the actor. I can't remember his name, but the actor that played Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay. I would think it was for like Men's Health, and he was just talking about how he got into shape, boxing for the character. When I saw him, I was like, okay, I need to see this. Like, I need to see how this guy becomes Cassius Clay, because Muhammad Ali is one of my favorite heroes, one of my favorite boxers. I'm one of those. I don't know if a lot of people are, but I was a fan of Will Smith doing Ali. So I was excited about that. And also Malcolm X, what little I know, but I definitely have known more as I've gotten older, spending more time learning about him, has always intrigued me, has always been an interest of mine. And then Sam Cooke, more about, I don't know him, but when you hear his music, you're like, oh, that's Sam Cooke.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jim Brown, I'm not so familiar with, but I know that he was. I remember in the playing football. I actually thought it was real.
You thought
Actually,
what was real?
that 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 these guys did meet up in the hotel. It wasn't until after I watched the movie. I watch, like I like to do when I like a movie. I dive deep into it, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can see it as a play, you know.
Yeah, when the movie was first put out into the ethos, I was like, it's going to be interesting to be a fly on the wall hearing a very intimate conversation. But then I got to thinking, like, there's only one of those people who's still alive, I believe, which is Jim Brown, right? It's like, so who recounted that whole story of what happened in that place? Who was in the car? I mean, was it Muhammad Ali? Was it Sam Cooke? And who's retelling that story? There was just so many holes in the premise that I just couldn't do it. And then I remember hearing many of the anecdotal narratives that they had in there. It was just stories that I heard Sam Cooke say in an interview, or I heard Muhammad Ali say in an interview, or I heard Malcolm X say in an interview, and they just crafted all of these sound bites together to make one amazing conversation. So that, I mean, it was genius in what it was, but I was hoping that it would be the latter of the two situations, you know?
I didn't know what to expect. What piqued my interest was the iconic figures
Mm-hmm.
that we know about, or some, some more than others people, myself included. It wasn't until I started doing boxing that I really got more into Muhammad Ali, and 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 then as part of that, knowing Muhammad Ali outside of the boxing ring as well,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing his character, and knowing, I've just been such a fan of, watching his clips on YouTube, like, yeah, those interviews, and just the way that he composed himself, and how he stood up for the things that he stood up for. Because I was like, yeah, are they going to be in the room like the whole time? Like that's always that. Oh, that's always that
Right.
cynical filmmaker, storyteller is like, how do they do it? How are they going to do it? Like, they're going to be in that room, but then it's these iconic figures, and I think, like what you said, perhaps for some people that might not be enough
Mm-hmm.
because of who they are, because of what they represented. Some people may not have been exposed, or may just not care.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that there are lots of people who, it, this did resonate in some fashion.
So I got a few questions, but I think we need to jump into it. I need to jump into it. And
Yeah,
let's start with the question, like,
yeah,
what was your first takeaway? I mean, let's
sure,
talk about
sure.
your first thing that really grasped you about the movie.
Oh, that's great. That's a great way. Vulnerability.
Mm,
I believe we talked about this even in when we talked about Black Panther. Men, main character roles that are vulnerable.
mm,
And here we are. We have four, and four that society knows them. There's some kind of a background that we already have with these people, with these men, seeing their fears,
mm-hmm,
seeing their confidence, their strengths, but also one of my favorite parts was seeing their uncertainties.
mm,
That was huge for me. From the filmmaking standpoint, the director or the team allowed them to play out those moments. So that my second viewing, I was watching the exchanges with the characters and watching the
mm-hmm.
reaction of each character. and it was amazing. That is what stuck out for me. And then there were other things that were just as important, but maybe to me just didn't strike me as quick, not until the second viewing. So how about you?
You know, I think this is going to be very difficult to say, but I think Regina King did something that was very reminiscent of Baz Luhrmann. Baz Luhrmann is the type of director that is going to tell you what's going to happen at the end, but he's going to craft this story so well that you are going to want to see the whole thing. He does it in Moulin Rouge. He said the person I love is going to die, you know what I mean? And then they go through it. He did with Strictly Ballroom and so on and so forth. So he really lets the person in on the end of the story. He almost ruins it for you. The way Regina King did this is, you know how it all ends. You know how it all is. Not only that, if you're a person of color, you've heard the same story. It doesn't matter whether it's in the music. It doesn't matter whether it's in the plays. It doesn't matter whether it's in the biographies or the history books. It's all the same conversation, but you're going to get a different way to appreciate it. It's going to be served up, stylized, and put onto a platter for you to enjoy and digest in a different way, because for more than 100 years, this conversation has been happening, right? And so that was the first thing that stood out to me. I'm like, we've been having this conversation forever. What is unique about your story that's going to make me feel good about it, or give me some insight that I've never heard? And amazingly, she was able to do it. She was amazing. She was able to get me emotionally engaged in a way that kept me enthralled in the story and not like, this again. You know what I mean? But we've heard the struggle, the civil rights thing. We've seen the Jackie Robinsons, the Satchel Pages. We've seen all these pro athletes. We've seen, go through the struggle, be the big person that everybody loves and hates, the superstar, the Muhammad Ali's and the Joe Frazier's we've seen it. Right? What's different about your story? And she brought in a level of vulnerability. She brought in a level of power and integrity. And not only that, she found 4 characters who could historically be in the presence of each other and not be overshadowed. It's really hard to do. Malcolm X and his circle, no one stands in his shoes. Muhammad Ali, no one out talks him. Right? Sam Cooke blows everybody out of the water with his voice. Jim Brown was the most dominant football player of his era. Only these men could be in the same room together, on the same stage, on the same dais, talking to each other in the way that they were talking to each other. Hurting, harming, verbally jousting, comforting each other in the way that only powerful men can comfort powerful men. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was a really growing moment to see this portrayed in this way.
I love that. Wow. I love what you said there. Powerful men, how as powerful men can be.
Yeah, I think there's a certain level, and maybe I'm wrong, but when I was a kid, men enjoyed the company of men. Mm-hmm. Right. And you weren't looked at as, homosexual or this, that, and the other, or funny or queer, or everything like this. But there's a certain level of accountability that we can have for each other in those spaces. I can hold you accountable in a way that your wife can't. I can hold you accountable in a way that I couldn't if your wife was there. Right? I can hold you accountable in a way that your peers can't. Mm-hmm. Right? When you're the top of the heap, the other people's opinions don't matter. right? You don't talk to a lion about the plight of sheep. Only Malcolm could be in the space of Jim Brown and find consolation, right? Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke. Powerful men breed powerful men. They create powerful figures. They lift and elevate people into an echelon of stardom. So for me, that was a really proud moment on the scale of, the Black Panthers or some of the other powerful movies like the original Malcolm X.
Mm. Mm. You're talking about the Spike Lee?
Yeah, the Spike Lee version.
Yeah.
The Spike Lee version was crazy. It was so amazing. It was ridiculous. People don't get, I don't think a lot of people get, is that if you watch the Spike Lee movie, what you're going to get is the pre-Malcolm X, Malcolm X, and then you're going to get Malcolm X after his Hajj and then his death. This movie takes place right between that. After leaving, but before he leaves the country, after leaving the Nation of Islam, but before he leaves the country, which a very transformative space for him. So if we talk about, like, let's just take Malcolm, because we need to take out Malcolm X's role and put it in context, because he was kind of the linchpin for this whole thing. Malcolm X, his mother was Guamanian. Okay. Dad was Black. His mother spoke 9 languages. Right? Father was a preacher. Father was more than likely killed by the Ku Klux Klan, but that was after they'd been chased from city to city to city. So he already has a natural hatred for oppression and for generally white people because of the offenses that happened. He was taken from his mother because she couldn't care for him, because back in the days, they created an environment that was not only oppressive to men, but oppressive to women, because your man, your husband, your partner was supposed to bring home the money. He's the money maker. And that's one of the reasons that people targeted Black men, because if you get the Black man, then the rest of the family falls apart, because they have no access to income, because women weren't allowed to work in most places. Right. So that target happened. So now his mother is being oppressed and she got committed in an insane asylum. He wound up doing, criminal activities because he's a child, went to reform school. They put him out on the streets with no father, no mother, no family. Ironically, you know who one of his best friends was? Red Fox.
Oh, no way. Huh.
Yep. They call one Chicago Red, the other one Detroit Red. Right. And they also wash dishes in the same chicken joint. Right. And they went out and they would commit crimes and they would do their thing. And one went on to become Red Fox. The other one went on to be Malcolm X, which is absolutely amazing. They both call themselves Red in a different state because they both have red hair. Then he goes to jail and he gets on the FBI watch list before he joins the Nation of Islam, because I believe he wrote he wrote Truman and said, the war that you're committing, I think it was the Korean War at the time, is a farce, and because of this, this thing, I'm going to become a communist who's anti this, that, and the other. And so the FBI opens a file on him. So now fast forward, he becomes a Muslim and his views are a lot different than what people were talking about. He's a staunch feminist. People don't know that he was a feminist. He's anti-oppression of any group of people. People don't realize he's a freedom fighter for all people. The sound bites that you get are only the ones that are anti-established, anti-white, or anti-system. But you don't hear about the anti-segregationists. You don't hear about the anti-patriarchy. You don't hear about these other things that he talked about and tried to shed a light on, because they didn't want people coming together and saying, hey, I can be with this guy. He's fighting for our cause, or he's fighting for our cause. So now you fast forward to a man who's tried to champion the little person and is now ousted broken. Nobody believes that the FBI is watching him. Nobody's believing that he's being tapped. Nobody believes that everybody thinks he's paranoid. Right now, he doesn't know if the Nation of Islam is watching him. They don't know if it's his own friends or if it's the police or if it's the government. They're basically gaslighting him to create a situation where he looks like he's losing his mind. And they did the same thing to Martin Luther King. So now you enter this hotel room where this man is on his last straw. He's got nothing. His house, no car, he has nothing. And now he's with these people who have everything. Almost like he needs a handout. That pride. Can you imagine you were once a member of this group and now you've lost everything and everybody thinks that you may be losing your mind and you need a handout. That's where the movie really starts, in that space of an abused man, an abused boy, an abused leader who another father figure betrayed.
I notice the first scene where we meet Malcolm. I mean, the first scene that we meet him with his wife, with Betty, right? There was a lot of important information. You might miss some of these important pieces. They even say, "We are all alone." I really liked how delicate those scenes with his family were, and how much that was such a big part of who he was, even amongst the other guys and their lifestyle, the possible FBI or whoever was looking. These little pieces that really make the story, enrich the story and help make it more complex, more dynamic. And even the way Sam Cooke responds to him looking out there, and then you see Sam Cooke looking out there, and he's like, he it's like you definitely feel something for Malcolm, but then Sam Cooke, as a friend, he feels something for his friend but he's not sure what he can do about it.
I think also when Sam Cooke was looking out the window, the window was really symbolic of two different perspectives. Malcolm was looking out and seeing someone who was a potential threat, someone who was trying to assail his character, if not his family or his person, where Sam Cooke was seeing people who maybe want to further his career, add something else. He didn't know who those people were. He's thinking it's some reporters. He thinks it's some people who maybe found out we're at the hotel and they want autographs. He has no idea, but they're two different perspectives, and I think that that's really important to highlight, that window scene is really a perspective shot.
Yeah.
It gives you a different inclination of their minds, because those are two people who went at it, because those are people who had two different perspectives. And that was the unifying line to show you that they have two different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice the opening title? How he was under the water, the iconic photo, Muhammad Ali. I'm sorry, Cash. Well,
yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, "This is gonna be." I had a gut feeling this is gonna be on another level. Just the authenticity. It was stylized, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I did feel that too. I felt like there was a nice juxtaposition of stylized, but yet we're still going to talk about these things that maybe you might only hear, in a hotel or, in a house or amongst the people that you really trust, or, you trust and you love. And some of the jousting, the dialogue was intense. Like, I remember watching it and I was like, is he gonna keep going? They didn't just leave you hanging. They also followed through with that. Like, like, let's say that scene where he finally gets Sam Cooke so rattled, and he leaves. I don't know if it was Cassius or Jim Brown or maybe both of them, but they're like, you crossed the line. You kind of went too far. And he's like, I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Props to these guys that the performances, the acting.
Yeah.
Uh, I was in. I was so in from the first frame to the last.
Yeah, and speaking to the underwater
Yeah, yeah,
boxing thing,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, when they came in on that as a boxing fan, I was like, yeah, I mean, you got me. You got the hotel, you got the pool, you got this idea, you got them clowning because it's really true. He couldn't swim, but he loved to do training in water because he felt like little did anybody else know that this was actually a great low impact workout and resistance training simultaneously to be able to get in there and do that. I don't know where he got it from, but he's definitely, I've seen multiple pictures with him training in the water, right? Maybe it's his excuse to be in the water, or because he couldn't swim, or he's playing around, or I have no idea. But I do know that this was an interesting thing. But the other paradigm is this. For those who are not boxing fans, one of the things that you have to understand as far as the cultural narrative is that in boxing is one of the few industries where you still have to play on the racial stereotypes in order to sell tickets. What do I mean? When you have a darker skinned black guy, there's a couple different frames. You give him the angry black man or the vicious guy. And when you get the other ones, you get the lighter skinned guys, you get more of the this is a great young man, he's so well spoken, or he's the happy black man and nothing ever gets him down. And you'll see these, and when you look at it like this, in your mind, can you tell me what Sonny Liston looks like? Can you see a clear image of Sonny Liston, his face?
No.
You know what I mean? How about Floyd Patterson?
No.
Right? These are all people that Muhammad Ali fought. Right? But we can't see them in our mind because we've been sold an idea about who they are, not the actual identity of what they are. Sonny Liston's a monster, he's a beast, he's a this, he's a that, and they talk about him in these animalistic terms so that you already feel like you know him. But rarely do they ever focus on his fate. Rarely do they ever show a shot of him. Rarely do they really focus and get a good interview with this person. They want to sell you on the idea how he's being portrayed, almost like wrestling, right? Whether it's true or not, what they want are the stereotypes so that they can get the certain boxing fans in. Muhammad Ali, he's this uppity Negro. I'm like, you can't just say that to white people, they'll kill you. People told him that all the time, his whole life. You cannot say that to white people. They will kill you. They'll shoot you. You cannot get away with. You can't beat up white people and do this. In the same way, you can see, one of the few people who got out of that and was in that space was Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, great fighters, and but they were also considered uppity. Jack Johnson, same thing. You'll see the angry Negro in Floyd Mayweather. You'll see him in Sonny Liston. You'll see him in Joe Frazier. You'll see him in, although these people were some of the nicest people.
Yeah.
Right? The happy Negro, George Foreman. Now look at how often George Foreman's face. If you think in your mind, you can see what George Foreman looks like. The other thing is we have to remember that Muhammad Ali was really young, 22, 23, 24. 25. We've all said things that we didn't want to say at that age. Muhammad Ali was the opposite of Malcolm X, as Muhammad Ali was not a feminist. Right? He was pro-integration, pro-segregation. He even talked to the Klan. Actually went out to a Klan meeting and preached on how he thought that blacks and whites should not mix, marry, or anything like that. He was so pro-black that he was anti almost everything else in the narrative. But he's 22. He's got a heavyweight belt. He's one of the baddest men on the planet. You can't tell this man nothing, right? Which is another reason why we had to get Malcolm X away from Muhammad Ali. This is why the thing happened, because his spiritual advisor, who was Malcolm X, notice in that scene where you see he's like, this is my spiritual advisor, Malcolm X, but when he's being inducted into the Nation of Islam, you see the empty chair. The empty chair was it was figuratively referencing that Malcolm X wasn't here anymore. Yeah. And now he's being indoctrinated in a language of hate, a language of separation, a language of anti-American sentiment. Now, mind you, I'm not pro-American rhetoric, you know what I mean? But I am definitely not anti my country. So, yeah. But this was really interesting to be able to see a person who is vacillating between being the Black person that he was at the time, which was upper middle class, Black person, Olympic title holder. He's won awards, he's won belts, he's a star, and then becoming this outspoken voice for what was considered at the time a hate group.
I feel like we don't ever know much about Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali's, the dynamic of his family, and because I was curious at such a young age. I wanted to raise the question, like what drove him, or what, if you knew, what drove him to seek out specifically Nation of Islam, or was it Malcolm? Like,
to seek out the nation. Yeah. Well, no, Malcolm X was a very charismatic person, and he brought the visibility of the Nation of Islam onto a world stage, a global platform, and so he was a voice that was being seen on television, that was being heard on radio. He was a person that was somebody who was permeating the American mentality at the time, and he was in sharp contrast to Martin Luther King. So you had two different people, and you kind of had to choose: are you a Martin or are you a Malcolm? Right? But you will be a part of the struggle, which is the problem with Sam Cooke's character, because Sam Cooke was like, I love being loved by white people. I'm not doing anything to make my audience, mad. And why should I speak ill of other people? These people pay my bills, pay my car, keep my wife in these houses in beautiful clothes. And so he's like, all these other people are like, we've made a choice. You have to make a choice. And Sam didn't make a choice, but he made an anthem for the struggle. He made a rallying cry for the struggle. He made a testimonial that will probably withstand the test of time, because he was pushed by his peers. Because Bob Dylan created that song that, in Sam Cooke's words, said it spoke to him in a way that he had never been spoke to before, and he was angry that he didn't write that song. That a white guy could speak more about Black struggle. So Malcolm X's lines was actually Sam Cooke's line. He said spoke more about the struggle than he ever could.
It's like one of the lines that they say that also resonated with me. If you're not, I can't remember exactly, but it's like, you have to choose your side, right? If you're, because that's something that I had to deal with myself, is understanding that if you're not with us, then you are against us. Mm-hmm. Having to decide because of all the racism, the policies, the systems that are in place. So then at a young age, Muhammad Ali knew what side he was on, definitely. And he found the organization. So at the time was represented by Malcolm's persona and that kind of thing. But then as we see in the film, he's at a turning point because of all the things that Malcolm is at a turning point where he has to make the decision, the difficult decision, because people are making it difficult, to leave. Because I love it that they show the ritual, mm-hmm. The prayer.
Making salat, yeah.
Yeah, and but then at the end,
Mhm.
he decides not to go. He decides not to go with Malcolm.
No, that's not what
Oh,
happened.
okay.
Malcolm, Malcolm made the choice of delivering him into the hands of the Nation of Islam.
Oh, to protect him, or
Not to just protect him, but he didn't know where he was going to be. Malcolm had nothing to offer, you know what I mean?
oh,
And he could try and use this man to do this thing, but he was like, you know what? I'm a man of my word. I said that I was going to do this thing, and I delivered you back into the hands of the Nation of Islam. You know what I mean? And then Malcolm was removed from the Nation of Islam.
yeah,
So maybe you could say he left. You can also say he was removed. But
oh,
the car, like she said, the car, the house, everything, we don't own any of it,
yeah,
right? And so, you know, I think it's more he was pushed out because people didn't want to see what it was that Malcolm X saw. You know what I mean? They didn't want to believe that this charismatic leader was doing these things, um, which at the end of the day, I think has been proven to be
mm,
so. But at the time, they were gaslighting him. It really went to a different place for Malcolm. And I think he did the right thing. At the end of the day, I think that Muhammad Ali needed to be with a stable organization that understood his pain, understood his rage, understood his need to be in a protective environment where it could foster not only his strength but his education in who he is as a Black person in America who is being under fire and witnessing people like him being under fire. He needed to be able to have that protection because you got to think how many death threats Muhammad Ali gets just going to a boxing match and not knowing, well, I'll just call the police and have them escort me to the ring. But these are a bunch of white men. And then there's a bunch of white men in the audience. And then there's a bunch of, it turns into this thing where you can't know who you trust. So it's like, I'm going to come down here with a group of people, make sure I get to my job, make sure I get to these places. I got protection. Again, another component that people don't talk about, the death threats, and the need for protection. And the Nation of Islam specializes in providing African Americans with that level of protection. Not only that, but their families. Because who's with your wife and your children while you're boxing or while you're away at boxing camp? You trust someone who is in the struggle with you, not with the potentially in the struggle against you.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think Malcolm understood this and said, I can't give you that at this moment in time, go with them. And if for some reason you feel like this is not your calling, you can always come back and we will create something that we can do for ourselves.
Well, thanks for making that, clarifying that for me. It makes, yeah, I see the connection now. The more we talk about these type of details, it makes me really feel for Malcolm X, like completely.
If you ever get a chance, look up you can go and see some of the redacted FBI files on Malcolm X, and you can see like call his house. They call his house like 100 times a day and hang up. Call his house 100 times a day. Scare his kids. Drive out front. Throw bricks at the window. You know what I mean? Like this is our government. So now not only is he outed as is treated like a communist at the time, which they shouldn't have treated him. They're also treating him like a Black guy, which they shouldn't have treated him. And then they're treating him like a terrorist, a potential terrorist. He's a triple threat, And so they gave him the treatment to try and drive him crazy, try and drive his wife away, to try and fracture him, and pretty much it worked.
Yeah.
He had to leave America in order to find himself.
He leaves for Mecca.
Yeah, he makes Hajj, but before he did that, there's another thing that people don't remember or don't understand is that he went to Europe first, did speaking and lecturing in Europe, went to Africa, did speaking and lecturing there, went to the Middle East, did speaking and lecturing there, and then went to went on Hajj.
Mm.
He was about, he says himself, I'm about liberation. You know what I mean? I'm about equality and human rights. He identified as a human rights activist who happened to be Muslim. But again, what really got him is he wanted to go before the UN and bring the plight of African Americans to the UN. That became a problem. I think that was his undoing. It's like we really don't need to be putting this problem on the world stage. He went on Hajj, and then when he came back from Hajj, after meeting other Muslims, after gaining the support of non-Muslim, non-Nation of Islam Muslims, it's like, wow, this guy can, if he's going to rally the Black community, it was probably about 9 to 10% of the population at the time. You had other Muslims who were another demographic of, probably 3 to 5% at the time, but they had affluence because they had blonde hair, blue eyes, they had red hair and green eyes. They had, they could pass for white, and they had those jobs. Mm-hmm. They had influence, they had place of power. They just didn't let people know that they were Muslim. Now he's in with them. He's in with, he's got access to money because he talked to people, oil people. They're like, we can support you now. Because notice he didn't have a problem with having a house then. He didn't have a problem with having a car then. You know what I mean? He went and got the financial means that he needed in order to be in that place. And then he gets done in.
Jim Brown and Malcolm X about the lighter skin. What were your thoughts about that? Because we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, I talk about this conversation a lot. I mean, we just started talking about the colorism, the colorism in boxing, and then there's colorism amongst African Americans. You know what I mean, and about being light skinned and being dark skinned. On a personal note, I was actually in a Facebook group where someone says, "How does colorism affect you as being a Black man?" And I was saying that I've always been in the middle. I've never been dark enough to be considered chocolate or light enough to be high yellow. And so I've never felt comfortable talking about colorism in a room where there are Black men and women who are swung to the polarities. So I don't talk Blackness with Black people around colorism because I'm like, dark-skinned guys like, yeah, you don't understand what we're talking about. Light-skinned guys are like, you don't know what you're talking about. And so I just don't talk about it. I'm willing to rep it to the world, and talk about being a Black man or Black person in America. But amongst my own peer group, I still don't really talk about it. That being said, I do recognize what Jim Brown is saying, and that some of the most pro-Black people I've met are some of the lightest skinned people that I've ever met. You know what I mean? I know a bunch of light-skinned people who are just double O Negro. Like they take Blackness to the oomph. You know what I mean? And are they trying to prove something? I don't know. Are they trying to be recognized? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know how to have that conversation, but I've seen it. And I've also seen Black men who are the darkest you can pretty much think of try to be neutral in a room. Like it's like, we all know you're Black. It's okay. Like you don't have to code switch in this space. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to be Black. You know what I mean? And for some reason, some of them try to hide it. So it's such an advanced conversation and very difficult to deal with in a very taboo subject, even for me to talk about. But it definitely exists, and they have what's called the paper bag test. Are you familiar with the paper bag test?
Not the paper bag one, but the dolls.
No, paper bag test is if you were darker than a paper bag, you were like untrustworthy.
Oh my gosh.
If you're a paper bag or lighter, you're okay. Right. And so that's how people segregated different types of Black, was the paper bag test.
this was something that was ingrained, like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
you can Google it. It's a paper bag test, and it really started really with whether you could work in the house. If you were lighter skin, you were passable. You could work inside the house. You got more favor. You got more treats. You got more freedoms. You got more, relative whatever freedoms are. You got more, and then because you were darker, they gave you less intentionally. It was really intentionally created to cause division between black people, black and brown people, because Latinos, even some Cubans, consider themselves white
Mm-hmm.
because of the Spaniards and because of their light skin. It's like, hey, I'm white. What are you talking about? I'm white. You're Cuban. Nope, I'm white. You're black. You get some Latinos who are Afro-Cuban are cool with it. Puerto Ricans are Afro-Cuban are cool with it. But then you get some Puerto Ricans, they're like, no, I'm white. Right. And it's really a culture that created this idea, this so division between people who are brown. Even you probably even see it with dark skinned Asians,
Yep. Yep.
right? Dark skinned Asians, light skinned Asians.
I remember seeing this documentary in Cambodia. They were doing like getting plastic surgery because of the color, like lighter,
Mm-hmm.
get more privileges or opportunities. And I never thought about that before. That was like a wake up call for me. And then I think it might have been you bringing up to me. We watched a YouTube video of the baby doll test, and that was another reality check, for me of this happens and this is happening. So kind of it put my own perspective in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And I think it's important too because you see that in Sam Cooke you have a very dark skinned black man, and in Jim Brown you have a very dark skinned black man, and both of them had two very different ways of navigating the space. Whereas one came into it like, I'm black, I'm gonna be black, I'm not gonna compromise about being black, like I'm not gonna tone it down, I'm not gonna do anything, right? Whereas Sam Cooke is like, you know what, let me just kind of get through these situations. It's about making this money. It's about, we ain't gotta get stuck on the black thing. You know what I mean? Again, that's in the movie. Um, but he was doing things for black people behind the scenes, right? But he's like, man, I don't want this attention on me because then they're going to alienate me. They're going to lock me out of these doors. They're not going to give me the opportunity to create. Sam Cooke had 40 top 10 songs in 7 years.
Whew.
Like, that's how prolific Sam Cooke is. He's only missed one tour date, and it was because of segregation. You know what I mean? You're talking about an iconic man, and who technically is a very dark-skinned black man existing in the United States, but is pretending to be complacent so that he can have financial access to uh, specific economies within the United States that would normally not allow it to happen. I got a question for you.
Yes, please.
What is as a I don't know if you identify as a brown man. I think you're a brown man and respect you as a brother in I like to say a brother in arms, right? How did the movie affect you as a brown person? How did you feel about the conversation around color?
Yeah.
And how did you feel about these brown/black men having these conversations about people of color?
There were many scenes that became very relevant for me, uh, because of the changes that have been going in me, the uh, awakening, the turning a new leaf
Okay.
perspective. I got quite emotional when Malcolm, he says it was absolutely necessary because Black people are dying.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just the emotional weight and the gravity of that scene, based on what I now know and based on what I now have accepted, not necessarily agree, but have accepted, it mattered to me because I don't want that to happen. The things that I now know, I never wanted it to happen, but in a sense, I don't think I had chosen a side. I think I was playing it maybe like Sam Cooke,
Mm.
using what we've been talking about, using on what the movie shared with us. Not
Mm-hmm.
knowing Sam Cooke personally, but I feel like for a long time, for much of my years, even even after a couple years, our friendship, I still had not was not able to accept the truths and was in denial to a certain extent because I didn't want it to be true.
Mm.
Like in the movie, these iconic figures, my heroes, they are my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Muhammad Ali has become one of my heroes because of the way he speaks. What's that line he says about about rent? Loving people, like loving people. That's your rent or something like that while you're still alive or something like that here. So that scene where Malcolm is pushing the edges, pushing because he truly believes that if he doesn't push, he's gonna lose
Mm-hmm.
another believer, another supporter. For me, watching this at this time in my life and being a grown man who has truly begun to decipher his values, his his thoughts, his beliefs, his integrity. It was really powerful for me to hear, for me to witness that. The last thing that resonated with me very much was that scene with Muhammad Ali and Sam Cooke in the car, and he talks about power, and he talks about being seen. That hit me because how much you mean to me, how much other brown people uh, in my life matter. And if we're not being seen, not only are we not being seen, but we're being killed.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a no-no. That to me is a I now understand. I want to do everything that I can to be against that and perpetuate whatever I can in my power, in my body, to not allow for that. But I understand it's a systematic thing. It's deeper than my knowledge. But I think being educated, being revealed, accepting has been a big part of that.
Mm.
Accepting that it's not imaginary, that it's real.
Mm.
And so that scene in the car where they're talking about power, being safe to be who we are, to live how we want to, the human rights, like any human,
Mm-hmm.
that was
No,
so important to me.
that's good. I'm glad to hear it. That's one of the things that I'm talking about. When we're talking about there, it's the same story. The police is about the government. It's about uh, state sanctioned and government sanctioned murder. It's about structured racism and oppression. And we're in 2021. They were in 1960 something.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? But before that, this whole thing got started because of something else. And then that movement got started because of something else. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really important to really be able to understand that this is not a part of imagination. It's not a figment of imagination, right? There's no justification for it. And you know what's funny? You know, they got 50 million reasons as to why you shouldn't kill an animal,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but can create every reason as to why it's okay to kill a person of color, or to lock a brown child in a cage, right? Or to have a prison, I'm sorry, a preschool to prison pipeline, or, you know what I mean? Like, they have all these things like, let's rescue animals, but can't rescue a child who's in danger, right? How many people would have allowed an officer to kneel on a dog's neck to the point of killing him, but not a human? You can rationalize humans killing humans, but not an animal. This, what it says is that a group of people in this, based on color, are subhuman, right? And Malcolm X in that movie is not just fighting a race war, but for humanity, to be recognized on this earth in this moment as a man, to have the rights of a man, to be afforded the luxuries and the humanity of a man. I mean, he said it. He said, in this day, at this time, by any means necessary. But he will not be dehumanized any longer. So if you can't afford a person their humanity or right to exist, you know, then there's a problem. And I don't see why other people can't see how that is not a problem. This movie, in a more eloquent way, is elevating the conversation that happened in their time, that's happening in our time, that happened to their parents, that happened to their parents' parents, that happened, you know, their friends and family and their relatives. And we're just talking about it in another format, in another venue, in another age, another era. Nothing changes. And it's unfortunate.
If we do always hear these conversations, if nothing is changing, what is there then?
What is there if nothing changes?
Because what I'm feeling is that despite what's happening or despite what's been done, the conversation still needs to happen. What makes this one different from the other ones that maybe don't resonate as much?
I think they all resonate in their own way.
Hmm.
You know, Malcolm X, the movie Malcolm X delivered a message. It was a message of hope, a message of resistance. It inspired men and women to take pride in who they are as Afro Americans, to be able to walk tall and not just be complacent with the status quo. It was a message that was lost on my generation and maybe the generations just before me. And that was what it was designed to do. This one was about a man, it was about a human being who was at his wits' end, a man who took care of everybody else before himself, a man who put the struggle and the plight of Black people before the struggle and plight of his own family. It was about a man who saw an opportunity to use a young man, a young, easily to influence man, and did the right thing. The evolution of Malcolm X, not the revolution of Malcolm X. And I think that seeing that strong man with tears in his eyes, seeing him be comforted and loved by another man of power, of his stature, to see that there's a certain level of intimacy between not just Black men, but human beings. That space can be created for those feelings, and it's okay. I think they got a chance to show men that they can be emotional, that they can be driven to a point, and it's okay to show yourself in all your humanity. You can show yourself in every aspect of who you are and still be masculine, still be powerful, still be a person that is worth following. Because at the end of the day, humanity is what we're fighting for, so we have to be able to demonstrate it and not just be some version of man, but be a human.
Well said. Well said. That was it. That was why I wanted to watch it 2 times. Our friendship, our relationship, and the men that we do, but we are able to have, you know, and maybe it's not a lot. When I watched those guys in the room, I thought about you. I thought about Henry.
Likewise.
My heroes.
I get to be Malcolm X in this story.
Oh, hey, Ali.
Yeah. Well, I guess that leaves Henry to be Sam Cooke there.
Because he's not Jim Brown, right?
No, he's not Jim Brown at all. I wonder who our Jim Brown would be. Maybe we haven't met Jim Brown yet.
Thomas.
Oh, Thomas can be Jim Brown. Okay, I got it. There's Thomas. I got it.
Right. So Henry, you're gonna have to sing us a little melody.
The ecosystem that we have inside of ourselves and all the things it's connected to and how it's wired is really unique, in that what some people deem as being the man has something to do with like the job you have or your access to money so you can provide for the people that you love. And they feel like that's the man. Or there's this, this physical prowess that a person has where he's a strong lover or a good fighter or something, and that's a man. And then there's, the good loving friend, and that's a man. And there's there's so many things. But at the end of the day, we are all those people. Everyone in that room has a place in our being and in our psyche. And we're not accessing all of them because we're good at one. And so we lean into that. But we're not accessing Malcolm. We're not accessing Jim Brown. We're not accessing Sam Cooke. We're not accessing Muhammad Ali. We're just picking one and staying rooted in that one because that's what we're good at. But we're not cultivating the whole shebang. We're not bringing out the whole thing. When it's time to lead, Malcolm needs to come to the forefront. You need to speak passionately about who you are and what you believe in and demonstrate that you're a man of conviction. And then when it comes to writing a sonnet, a song, a love letter, a magnum opus that comes from something deep in your heart to the woman that you love, let Sam Cooke come out and emerge. And when you have to be alone in a ring, you against the world, let that Muhammad Ali out. Fight the good fight. Get knocked down. Get back up. It's not over until it's over. Keep going. That mentality. We are all of those people rolled up into one, but we're selling ourselves short every day and not really embracing our power, leveraging the entire emotional, psychological ecosystem in order to achieve the goals that we want. And I think it's we're all the worse as men for it. I challenge you to speak with your peers and your friends and your family and the ones you love and the people that love you with as much passion as they spoke in that movie, to incorporate and bring that into your existence and that world, to show that you're a man of principle, a man of character, and a man of passion. Because the only thing we can know about you truly is what you say and what you do, what you believe in, who you love, who you hate, who you loathe. Speak it into existence, understand who you are in that moment, and rise to the occasion.
As you're sharing, I definitely now can pinpoint some of those character archetypes in my life, but I would like to continue to bring them out, bring them out. What about Jim Brown? I'm trying to understand his character archetype. He's the one I don't know as much, even though his words were more soft spoken. His choice of words were more deliberate. I feel like he is quite complex. But what can we pull from Jim Brown, would you say?
Yeah, man, I have a problem with the Jim Brown because I realize that I have a fear of the Jim Brown archetype, not Jim Brown, but Jim Brown archetype. I actually met Jim Brown. I wasn't going to say this. I met Jim Brown under some very not so good circumstances, and he's a dick. You know what I mean? Like he really is in real life. But we have to separate the man from the myth. We have to separate the legacy from the legend. And in what he represents in that film is the war horse. He is the person that's like, I'm going to carry you across the finish line, kicking and screaming if I have to. The strong silent type is really hard to access. It's really hard to cultivate, but it's powerful. And it's like, how to be powerful without using your words? How do you be powerful without using your muscles? How do you be powerful without using your ability to intimidate or to swoon or but to just be so present in the moment that people find solace in you being in the room? That is so difficult to do, to be. I don't know if it's something that you can obtain, but it's definitely a quality to strive for each and every person. He has presence, and again, one of the things that I can say from actually meeting the man is before he enters the room, he's in the room.
Huh.
You know what I mean? Like, he's such a powerful presence. It's like an apex predator. It's like you may not see a tiger when it walks in the room, but you know it's in the room.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it's something in the air that's charged it up that says this person is here now. Right? It's time to pay attention. And Jim Brown definitely has that aura about him. He is the peak of physical prowess. No one wanted a problem with Jim Brown. No one raised their voice to Jim Brown. Right? Because even if you could beat Jim Brown up, he's got the cardio, the wind, the strength, and the tenacity and the fortitude to win this fight. You are not going to beat him. He's the indomitable force. And I realized for me, I probably left it off subconsciously because in my head, like when it comes to physical prowess as an older man, I'm like, oh, it's harder to bring out the Jim Brown because I'm older. Or my, I've got arthritis in my knees, or I've got this. I can't be a Jim Brown. But that's why archetypes are so important, because they highlight not only where you're strong, but where your deficit is. Let that emerge from you and organize yourself in a way that it inspires you and drives you and motivates you and walks you to be that which you can't be. I don't want to be lesser than anyone. I can see the avoidance in that. And so I'm like, I'm going to have to push myself physically to be able to assume some of those other things, because I believe that I've done the boxing, I've done the Malcolm Xing, I've done the Sam Cooking, I've been in music, I've been in boxing, I've been in the Nation of Islam. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've done those things. I have no problem accent. Where I failed was at football, when I played football. You know what I mean? When it comes to the athletics, I am not the best. And maybe this is where I need to start. This shows where my deficit is and where I need to start raising my game, where I need to start and maybe start at 47, getting healthy. But, you know, I got nothing but time, right?
Yep.
What about you?
When I learned boxing from you, I learned that confidence that Muhammad Ali had. Not to say I have the same one. You introducing me to try his style because you saw like for some reason, like I think that might work for you. I love it. I mean, it feels so relaxed, so carefree. Not to say that you're not in danger, but it's calculated measurement. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's where the confidence comes from. The I believe in myself. Also play. Also let's have fun. Let's banter. Let's joke around. Let's be human. The Malcolm. Wow. I guess I'm just scratching the surface on Malcolm.
You see how you can kind of use it as a tool to see where you're measuring up and not measuring up?
Yeah.
And not to anyone else's expectations or even to them, but to your version. You know where you're falling short. You know where your deficits are and where you need to raise your game, right? Nobody has to tell you. But this is how being around powerful men sharpens other men. It's like when that guy walks in the room, I feel like I don't even exist. And so do you want to be relegated to non-existence, or do you want to bring yourself up? You want to raise yourself. Do you want to put your chest out, carry yourself better, walk over and meet that person, shake his hand, look him in the eyes, speak with conviction? Problem people don't speak with convictions because they don't have it. What do you believe in? What's worth fighting for? What's worth dying for? And champion that cause, right?
Yeah. I believe that ever since I was a young boy, I did have a firm belief in justice and what I believed was should or should not happen. But I think as I got older, the world scared me.
Mm.
I felt like I gave away my power, but now I'm equipping myself with the tools. I'm equipping myself with the education, the knowledge, the people, the support, the foundation, the conviction. Now that I'm older, in these last couple of years, because I watched Malcolm X, the Spike Lee Denzel one, not too long ago, and I was moved in a different way. Where before I thought it was some like I was like, oh, I never got through the first part before because I didn't understand his journey, his spiritual path, but also, yeah, his conviction. I mean, it's his sacrifice is not many will do it. Recently, when I was in quarantine, I watched, a few documentaries, and one in particular on Martin Luther King Jr. I'm trying to remember the time period, but it was it was after Selma, and he went to Chicago to help the poverty situation. There was still a lot of stuff in the South, and he was like, I can't, I know I can't leave that, but there's stuff happening up here. I gotta go there.
Mm-hmm.
And he went there, and it was not easy at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that and I witness someone who made a choice, luckily with the love of his family, his wife, always so supportive from the beginning to even when she passed away. And I just love the story about him and his family inviting the kids into their home because they didn't have heat, I think, and he was trying to get heat in the building, and but all the kids were in there, and a lot of people weren't sure about him, but the people who got taken care of, like those kids, they knew what he was about. Now it was just a matter of getting all the politicians, the government of Chicago to support that, and that was not easy. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, down south, a whole lot of stuff was happening, and it's an intense documentary, but I feel like it was one of the things that helped me get stronger when I was feeling fearful and doubt, being in the confines of a hotel room for 14 days, having, I think the word is conviction. So yeah, and then Sam Cooke, I think most recently, having someone that I can treat like darling, it's
right,
like,
right.
I don't know how to describe it, but just Sam Cooke's music, all of his music. I need to learn a little bit more about Jim Brown, maybe to know a little bit more about his character, but based on what you've shared, hell yeah. To be that strong human, the one that will carry you on his back. I think I try to do that. If I could personify that in a physical sense, I think that's kind of a new thing for me. In the last couple of years, I'm also on that trajectory, given what you shared with me, what you've given me, what I've been able to experience through you, from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate that.
I mean, it never ends. It's always continuous. It's just, we're doing it differently. But I think all men need this. I think we talk about rite of passage. And the more men that I'm talking to that do want to be in these spaces, also, I always feel like I wish I had something for them where it is more like a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I can talk to them, I can have great conversations, we can hang out, but it's not the same when it's something a little bit more, something you can go to. But space, place, time.
Sacrifice.
Yeah. So I think this film was a nice conversation regarding the things that we already are about, we make a part of our lives, I think, already.
Mm-hmm. I so agree. And I hope that on some level, people who may or may not listen to this, really appreciate the vulnerability of you being in this space, speaking about, your successes and your shortcomings, as well as, being able to talk about what you feel like you need to work on, what you need to make better. And hopefully the audience that you create, cultivate, will grow with you and be able to recognize the leaps and bounds that you are making in front of them. You know what I mean? Because we have to lead by example. And what's funny is leaders aren't don't put themselves out. They're not dictators. They are elected by a group of people, and they are watching you all the time. They just like, we're going to follow that guy, and they're going to watch you. Everything that you do, you're a role model. And I think the biggest thing that you can demonstrate is to show them self-improvement, your growth. Demonstrate it, show how you've grown, and then move forward. That's powerful. It's like, you got to have that walk it like you talk it kind of swag. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's a TikTok video, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Yeah. No, this has been great. I'm so glad that you asked us to do this. Good. Yeah, that's a nice conversation.
Definitely. All right. So I guess
yeah.
For Orpheus Black
and Pete Wong, thank you so much for tuning in until our next movie or review or perspective take. It will happen.
Come back and see us.
Yep. All right. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. And remember, you are loved, you are enough, and you are worthy. Blessings to all of you.